Thanks for coming on today, Claudia.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I've been watching a lot of your campaigning and your group, Just Stop Oil. How do you like? What's Just Stop Oil about?
Yeah, so our demand is for the UK government to stop all new fossil fuel development. So, all new licenses, all new explorations, just no new fossil fuels.
And how much? Like, I know that there's in recent years, like there's been XR, and those movements are still going. When did it all start? When did Just Stop Oil start? And how did it start?
Yeah, oh God. So, Just Stop Oil, first of all, is a coalition. So, it's a movement made up of different movements. So, including but definitely not just Extinction Rebellion, Animal Rebellion, Youth Climate Swarm. And it's all these different groups coming together with this one aim. And it started, I only became involved really about 4 months ago, 3 months ago, but it was going on before then. And again, it was just this campaign where we're all so desperate for this change. We're like, if we all combine forces, we can really put the pressure that is needed on the government to make the change that we need.
And did like the I guess the demands are simple. It's just stop extraction. And have you had to has the group have they put together a list of demands to sort of the government and sort of spelt out exactly what they want?
Yeah, again, so obviously the demand is no new fossil fuels. So it's this understanding that what we need is a transition. We know we can't, stop just overnight. But at the moment, with the resources that we have, with the oil that we already have, that gives us enough time to wean off oil and gas, transition towards renewable forms of energy, use things like home insulation, better public transport to actually reduce our energy demand, which we have to do regardless of what where we're getting our energy from. Um, and yeah, we have a list of demands, but essentially what we're asking is for the governments to listen to the scientists who, for decades now have been warning us and telling us that what we're doing is putting us on a path to climate catastrophe.
And have you faced pushback from the government or different groups? Because I guess in Europe right now there's the war in Ukraine. And has that given the government a bit of cover to not take action?
Yeah, I mean, I think the government will look for any cover not to take action. They have been trying to use the war in Ukraine as a reason to push for more fossil fuels, to look as that to it as an excuse to continue this licensing process. And it's the most ridiculous thing because you look at the war in Ukraine and it is a war that is fueled by fossil fuels, fueled by a reliance on this industry that is destroying our planet and already killing millions of people. And the answer is so simple. We can't keep relying on this system that got us here in the first place. We have to move towards renewable forms of energy, which will give us a sense of security that fossil fuels never have and never will.
Mm. Like from what I've seen, it's definitely a war. Like the dependence on Russian gas and oil, especially in Germany and other countries across Europe. It sort of doesn't really make much sense when you see them supplying arms to the Ukraine, and then at the same time they're paying, from what I understand, $1 billion or €1 billion a day to the Russian government, which is paying for that war. And have you noticed in recent months that the rhetoric around just opening up gas fields and oil fields and so forth around the United Kingdom, has that occurred in the previous few months?
So the government is definitely pushing for this idea of we need to open up the North Sea for drilling because this will give us, again, a sense of security. It will mean that we will have independent energy and won't be relying on other countries. And again, it's just such a load of lies. You know, we don't even own as the UK the oil that is in the North Sea. It's owned, well, it's it's given to about 20 different companies who have licenses. So it won't even benefit us in this cost of living crisis that we're having right now, which also has been, like, the government has tried to use that to legitimize this idea of continuing drilling for fossil fuels. And again, all it does is keep us hooked on this destructive industry that is already killing millions of people and is essentially a death sentence for young people.
And I did notice that, especially with the inflation crisis and the cost of living, even here in Australia, it's global. Has the whole, I should say, it's pretty ironic actually. Like when you think about, I think the head of BP is making squillions of dollars and then making mega profits, and then at the same time, the cost of living of everyday people in the United Kingdom is going up. Has that been hard to point out to everyday people that actually, other people are getting away with, like they shouldn't be bearing the cost of this crisis? It should be the oil and gas companies.
Has it been hard, did you say, to point that out?
Yes.
That connection?
Yeah, to raise that awareness. Like, has that been something hard to point out to the general public?
I think it's hard to always connect the dots, understanding that all these crises, the war in Ukraine, the cost of living crisis, the climate crisis, they're all rooted in the same corruption and this reliance on this really destructive, horrific industry. But it's just so infuriating that you've got the government continuing to give, I think it's something like £236 million a week to an industry that has openly said that they have more money than they know what to do with, while over 2 million adults in the UK are struggling to eat, and while people are having to choose between heating their homes and providing meals for their children. The amount of corruption is just disgusting and ridiculous, and that's why we can't rely on this government. We can't rely on these so-called leaders to get us out of this situation. The change that we need has to come from and be demanded by ordinary people.
And I guess that drove the group to, like I've seen a lot of news clips recently, and I've seen the exchange, that the parody, in comparison to Don't Look Up with Miranda Wellahan, when she was on.
Yeah, Miranda Wellahan.
Yeah, she was on, was it Good Morning Britain?
Good Morning Britain.
Yeah, and they really, it was like crazy sort of arguments about her clothes and how, disruption now, and it just seemed to be was she the only person in the room actually? Did it actually occur to anyone else in that room that we're in this crisis? Has that been the thing that's really driven the group to really take actions into their own hands and do things like, I saw the BAFTA awards, protests at the BAFTAs, taking on, just being arrested at oil refineries and so forth. Has that been a driving factor, just the complete indifference by some of the media, but also the way that politicians have reacted?
It's everything. We are being warned now. We've been told by Sir David King, the former chief scientific advisor to the UK government, that we have 2 to 3 years, that what we do in these 2 to 3 years is going to determine the future of humanity. You have millions of people being displaced and suffering from starvation and drought. And you're being told by the UN Secretary General that delay equals death. And here the UK government is looking to license over 40 new oil fields. They are so disconnected. And the media, while I think there is an acknowledgement that global warming is an issue, is in no way expressing the reality of what is happening, and that this is an existential crisis. And so we have a responsibility to do absolutely everything that we can to create this change, because this isn't a future threat. This is happening now, and this is about our lives. This is about every single life on this planet.
And have you really, the reaction from the general public, have you found that there have been allies in unexpected places that have reached out to help you?
Yeah, obviously there's always a mixed response, and we expect a mixed response. But there was a survey recently that came out by YouGov, and it showed that actually the majority of the UK public agreed with the demand. Also, that more people were now willing to take direct action. I think slowly, nowhere near as fast as it needs to happen, but people are realizing the scale of this crisis and just the deep-rooted corruption. So ultimately, our aim is to, mobilize as many people as we possibly can to take action, to save our future, to save this incredible planet that we live in.
Have you found that just from my own experience, when you talk to certain politicians, they turn around and say, write a petition or go see your write a letter to your email to your local MP. That's really infuriating, and the indifference is something else. But is that being you've got a pretty outlandish sort of prime minister in Boris Johnson. Has he reacted directly to the protests and the actions that you've taken, or his government?
So, yeah, not directly from Boris Johnson that I know of. We have had, other members of government like Priti Patel really harshly condemn what we're doing. But it's like you said, it's just the indifference, it's just the disconnection of everything that's happening. And you do hear that argument so often: this isn't the way to do it, go sign a petition, go do this, as if people haven't been trying to do that, for decades, for over 30 years, with no success. And now is the make or break point where we decide what our future is going to look like. And asking people to sign petitions to put a trust in a government who's let us down over and over again, while people are literally dying, while the future of their children is being burned in front of them, is just ridiculous.
Yeah, it's unreal. And you mentioned before that you've been engaged for a few months in this campaign. What was the thing that got you involved?
Yeah, so prior to being involved in this campaign, I've been involved in a group called Animal Rebellion, who are basically a sister movement to Extinction Rebellion, but we're specifically focused on the impacts of the animal agriculture industry in terms of the climate crisis, which is an area that is hugely neglected. Um, and I started taking direct action with them because I just was so incredibly overwhelmed by everything that's happening in the world. And as an individual, I would do my best. Again, like only eat plant-based. You recycle, you don't drive, etc., etc. But you look at the scale of the crisis and it's not enough, and you think the politicians are going to solve it, and they just don't care. And it's that minute that you realize this change has to come from us, it has to come from ordinary people. And nothing is more powerful than coming together with other people who see the reality of the situation and are willing to put themselves on the line to create this better future. And so then Just a Boil came about. And, with this such an obvious step, such an obvious challenge to the government, and it felt like such a monumental moment to do this. And ultimately, I couldn't not be involved.
And you've found that have you found that people one of the main things I've noticed that in all of the arrests, all the videos of the interviews, that it's driven by young people, right? And is that the core of Just Stop Oil? Is it mainly the youth? A lot of people waking up.
I think so. We have a variety of ages in Just Stop Oil, but we have wanted it to be youth led in many ways, because it is the youth who are going to be the most impacted. It is, our futures that are directly at stake, as well as obviously the people in the global south who are right now feeling the brunt of the climate crisis, even though they're the ones who have done the least to contribute. So this is our future at stake. This is everything at stake. And we're all terrified.
Yeah, and I guess the looking forward, is this something like the strategy behind like looking forward? Are there any major projects around the UK that have that have red flag, that have really looked to be something that needs to be stopped, and are you involved in organising to try and stop them?
Yeah, so again, the government are looking to license multiple new oil fields. So
Yep.
any of those
Yeah.
have to be stopped. All of them
Yep.
have to be stopped. We're not going to stop. We know what is necessary. We know what is right, and we will continue to take action and engage in civil resistance for as long as we have to, because it's what we have. It's what gives us, the only hope we have is in taking direct action. And so we'll continue as long as we need to.
I was looking at the like the site with Just Stop Oil and with Nonviolent direct action as being one of the core philosophies of the group. Has that been effective as a strategy to highlight these issues?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, so we're completely non-violent. I think it's absolutely necessary, both in terms of how you engage with people. I think the minute you use violence, that will automatically just turn so many people off. So, from a strategic point, also, we're trying to create this world that is so much better and loving and caring. And how do you do that? Using violence. And also, it so whenever you have a group that is violent, it or uses more violent tactics, it usually then becomes primarily like able-bodied white men. And what we need to create are movements that are inclusive, that bring everyone along. And using a non-violent approach is the best way to do that also.
Hmm. And that approach, yeah, we've seen many leaders in history use that, Martin Luther King and so forth. And there's always that danger. Have you? It's sort of hard to the COVID pandemic, the rise of Trump, the rise of the far right, and all of these different issues all converging at once. It seems within the previous decade around this climate issue. Do you see them connected in a way?
Yeah, I mean, I think it all comes from a completely corrupt, toxic system where we don't care for people, we don't care for the planet, we don't care for all the other living beings, and profit trumps everything. And, you know, yeah, just trumps absolutely everything. And when we have this system that harvests division and hate and exploitation, nothing good is ever going to come out of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that looking at the United States, for example, when you've got one senator on a supposedly Democratic side, the fate of so many, the fate of climate action in itself hinging on decisions made by people who are bankrolled by coal, gas, oil. Like, it's something that can be disempowering, but I sort of believe that it's sparked a lot of it's sparked people to care. Even as you said, like, it all starts in the same place, and you look at the abortion campaigns in the United States as well, and that's also fueling this sort of it's behind these culture wars. I do feel that, because it's the same people pushing these oil and gas industries. They bankroll the same party that pushes the culture wars, and they sort of collide. And now we're sort of wondering what people actually stand for, our elected representatives. So, like, seeing what you're doing directly, it's something that gets in the face of people every day, and it makes people think about it. So I think it's really important. So, and like, have you found that with that direct action, how you like how do you fund your campaigns? Are they all done? Is it just everyday people like putting money forward?
So we have multiple ways of funding. So we do, obviously very grateful for donations from anyone. And we've also received funding from the Climate Emergency Fund, which has been amazing. Because obviously you don't want to, we wish we didn't need money, but obviously within the system you do, I'm so very grateful for any donations from anyone.
Hmm. Yeah, I do think that well, it pays. Yeah, it does pay for like a lot of the things that you need to get your message out. But since I'm just going back quickly, just to the some of the Good Morning Britain, uh, the media itself. When you look at the Don't Look Up moment, and I'll put these videos in the comments because I think it's important that people actually see like the reaction. And I did watch an interview with you with a UK talk show host, and how does is that getting out to the mainstream? I know they're trying to paint you in a certain way, and there is a certain age demographic that sort of sides with that sort of type of media, but just the absurdity of it. Do you think it's backfiring on the media moguls like the Rupert Murdochs and the so forth that are trying to ridicule you and put you in a certain box?
Yeah, I think so. And that's always the hope, I guess. Do, we will speak to most people, right wing, left wing, and obviously those interviews go differently. And in some, it's great. You can have really open conversations, and in other ones, you're fighting just to get the most simple word in. And the hope, and when you go into it, sometimes that there is no way you're going to get through to that interviewer. But the hope always is that someone listening will hear your message or will see the ridiculous corruption and hypocrisy of what's going on, and that will trigger something that will lead to change.
And how is your like your family? You don't have to answer it, but because family's a personal thing. But how does your family reacted to you being very involved in this campaign? Do they support you, or do you find it's it's
I've been so lucky that my family have been really supportive, and in a lot of ways, like for me, like what I do is very driven by them. So most of my family are in Chile, where the impacts of the climate crisis are very much being felt. So they get it, and they're really supportive. I think my mum particularly is sometimes worried, which I think is natural when you see your child doing some of the things we're doing, but they understand that I have to do this and that it's so important. So they're supportive, and I'm so grateful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think that that's a strange thing. It's almost like the recognition of some people can't get. I try and talk to a lot of people and find out what drives them and what sustains them. So because this is not going to just the victory isn't going to be just like tomorrow morning. How do you have any advice for any like other campaigners out on the campaign trail or young people that are looking to get involved in the campaign?
Yeah, it's hard, right? Because it's that saying, it's a marathon, not a sprint. But with the time that we have, we're basically trying to, just do everything we can now. But I think burnout is such a common thing that happens in activism because we all care so deeply and we know the importance of what we're doing. But we have to look after ourselves and we have to look out for each other. So for me, what has helped me most is the sense of community that you build, and making those connections, and then being able to look after yourself, but looking after one another as well, and taking those breaks when you need it, telling your friends that they need to step back for a minute, and understanding that we are also really important in this and we need to look after ourselves so that we can continue on this fight.
Yeah, it is something else, and it's hard to know when the end's going to be, but I do think that the motivation that people have and connecting the dots with other human beings is important. Like, it's almost a common, like you're talking to me, I'm in Australia, and we're fighting the same people, the same type of people, the same money, and trying to keep people in that sort of space that there is hope, we can do it, and we can win, is just like you're finishing uni very soon. Like, if you don't mind me asking, what are you looking at? Like, what's your degree in? Is that something that you're going to be?
Yeah, I can talk about it. Theatre production, so
Yep.
like theatre making, and it's something I've wanted to do forever, and I always imagined myself graduating and being so excited. And it's really bittersweet now because I don't see that happening, because as much as I would love to go out and focus on that, it doesn't feel right or possible at this point, because this work in activism, in doing everything we can to limit the damage caused by the climate crisis is just more important than anything right now.
Yeah. Well, I think on that note, on a positive note, I do wish you good luck with your studies. It's I know it's a really important thing to do, and I do really respect what you're doing. I think it's really important that your story be told and other people listen to it. So yeah, I'd just like to say good luck with the rest of the campaigns, and I'll try and check in, down the track. I think it's important that we keep this dialogue going. But also on another note, can you recommend any music? I've asked other people on this platform to see, because sometimes music is also a common language, and it sustains people through pretty dark times and campaigns and so forth. So, and I'll put that in the comments too, your track.
I'll send you one, but also there is one song called "Don't Watch the News, Be the News" by this guy called Pete the Temp. It's on YouTube. Okay. And we frequently play it to ourselves before actions, just to get ourselves pumped up.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I'll make sure to share that song, and I'll put it in the comments. But thank you so much, and
thank you.
And we'll touch base again soon, I hope.
I would love that. Thank you. And I hope that if anyone listening is interested and wants to take action or wants to learn more about Just Stop Oil as well, they can go on our website, or we're on Facebook, Instagram, and just reach out, and we would love to talk to you and have you join in this fight.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.